This is too formal.
Yeah, this is formal. All right, it's not formal.
You want to be informal, please?
Yeah.
Because you know I can chill.
Let's chill. Are we on? Are we going?
Yes, you're on.
Hey, everybody. Okay.
Can you see anybody? Is anybody coming on yet?
Yes.
Yes.
Tons of
Yes.
people.
Oh, we've got lots of people.
22 so far.
Lots of people, lots of people.
All right, Miss Vonnetta.
All right. Good evening. Welcome to the King Center. We're doing an informal chat as a preview for our January 9th forum, the Beloved Community Talk, Race Factor and Rights versus Responsibilities. We just wanted to sit tonight and have a brief conversation with Bernice A. King, who is the CEO of the King Center, and Nancy Lee Grahn, who's going to share in a moment why she's here with us. I'm Vonnetta West, and I just work at the King Center. I work here.
You work here doing
I
what?
work here.
What do you do?
What do you do?
I'm the Director of Education and Training.
Oh, just that.
Just that, here at the King Center. And so, before we actually get into anything, we want to, of course, we're a little late starting because we were looking at what's happening in Chicago right now and the release of the video of Laquan McDonald being shot, killed by a police officer there in Chicago. So in recognition of that moment, we just want to be sure we share our thoughts and our prayers with the city of Chicago and also with the parents and the family of Laquan McDonald. And remind us of the importance of community that we can work through and talk through issues. So our thoughts and prayers are with the city and with Laquan's family, who released a statement today. So thank you all for joining us. So we're going to get started with our conversation. Again, this is a preview of our Race Factor Forum, Beloved Community Talk Forum, rather, that we're having on January 9th as a part of our King Holiday Observance, which is a commemoration of Dr. King's birthday. It's every year. So we're having a forum called The Race Factor and Rights versus Responsibilities. And Nancy Lee Grahn, who's an actress for many years. Nancy Lee. For how many years? How long have you been
20 years on this one.
20 years
35. Yeah.
on General Hospital.
Yeah.
Had some things happen a few months ago and is going to share with us why she's a panelist for a discussion around the race factor and rights versus responsibilities, by way of just sharing what happened. Not all the way what happened, not deep.
No, we're going to give a
just
shortened version.
Short version.
A really short version.
A snippet.
A snippet.
Yes.
It was a bad night on Twitter. I'm sorry, you've heard the story before, so I don't want to bore you. Yeah, I know you have. It was a bad night on Twitter, and I'm going to speak up. It was what I thought was, I'm not going to swear because that's disrespectful, but I felt like it was a cluster F at the moment, but it turned out to be a moment of grace. And I'm going to give the backstory real quick because I think it has a bearing on how I got to the King Center. So it was a primetime Emmys night, and I was kind of watching it, kind of not watching it. Viola Davis won a lead actress Emmy. What people don't know is I wasn't even in the room, so I wasn't aware that it was a historic win. I was in the kitchen banging around pots and pans. I thought she had won this award last year. I was happy for her, but I didn't know it was a big deal. And so, for some ungodly reason, I decided to tweet my opinions about a speech I didn't hear and a win that I knew nothing about. If I could suck that moment back, I would, but nonetheless, that's
Unsuckable.
It's an unsuckable moment.
Yeah.
Are people saying anything before you finish?
Yeah.
I'm trying to see because they may not be able to hear.
Oh, can they hear?
Well, I'm seeing so far just hellos and highs.
Oh, okay. Hey.
Can you
Turn
guys
the volume
hear?
up. Just turn the volume
In
up.
Periscope world, can you hear? Can you hear Nancy?
Yeah.
I just want to
If
make
you can't
sure.
hear, let us
You
know.
have to hold it.
So,
to turn
do
it
you
up.
see anybody responding? To say
Right now,
what
this
they
one
can
just
hear?
froze, but
It froze.
now it's
Turn
turned
it
back.
down.
Delisa's big
Really?
growth.
Yes, we can hear. We
Okay.
can hear.
Okay.
I
You can
talk.
hear?
Okay.
You can hear great.
Because if not, I was going to turn this
Can you
off.
guys hear on
Oh,
this
okay.
one?
Can you hear on this one?
Can you all hear, those of you who are watching
The
via
Bia-
Bernice King, via the Bernice
Bia
King Periscope
It's
account?
Bia King.
Bia King account. Can you hear?
Bernice King is my phone.
Let me turn the volume up.
Can they hear?
They're not saying anything.
It's probably a good
You
chance they can hear.
hear.
They can hear because they're right next to each other. Yeah, but
Are we here? We
So
here?
we can always hear Nancy.
Oh,
We can always hear Nancy.
Those are some Nancy Lee Grahn
For better or
fans.
worse, they can always
What
hear
is it?
me.
Can they
Being
hear?
smart alecky.
They're commenting,
So
but they
they're
didn't
hearing.
say if they can hear.
Okay, so they
Okay.
can, it's okay.
I'll let you know.
Okay. Where was I? Oh, so then what happened was my Twitter feed blew up, and I had a lot of very, very angry people who were not typically on my Twitter feed talking to me about race, and I was confused because I'm talking about acting and everyone's talking about race, and I didn't get it. I was oblivious. Then a friend of mine emergency texted me and said, "Do you understand what has happened?" And that Viola Davis has just won the first Emmy for a black actress in, I think, 67 years, and that it's a historic win. I immediately felt the impact of that. I understood why people were reacting on my Twitter the way they did, and I felt the gravity of the situation. So now my Twitter feed is, there's a rampage, and I'm being called a racist, and people were understandably angry, and then I imploded. I freaked out, I panicked, I reacted, and I vowed to stay up all night and apologize to everyone I had offended, so you can imagine how that worked. It did not go well.
You stayed up all night too.
I had, by that point, had
watched.
lost my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I understood at that point the outrage, because I had inadvertently, but nonetheless, for lack of a better word, defecated on not only a great moment for Viola Davis, a victory, but for a victory for a culture of people who aren't celebrated nearly enough. But the thing I missed, that I have no excuse for, is that whether I thought she won last year or won 50 times, it didn't matter, because any time a black woman is held in high esteem, it means something to people who support progress and diversity.
So you get the outrage. You
I
didn't walk away
completely-
from the moment saying, I don't get why they're upset about this.
No, I absolutely understood the outrage. It made perfect sense, and I didn't mean for what was happening to be happening, but nonetheless it did. The thing that I learned from this,
It's your biggest lesson. You
the
wanna talk
biggest
about it?
lesson in this was that I didn't see race. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but I'm just telling you the truth.
That's that colorblind argument.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the colorblind, and
Did you hear that? It's the colorblind argument.
right,
Yeah,
that
That's not what my dad was speaking of, by the way.
what the colorblind for me was, I thought it was a sign of respect. And what I learned from this is that it is in fact not a sign of respect. I grew up, we talked about this, I grew up in Skokie, which is a Jewish community where my friends' parents had numbers on their arms. I grew up with a mom with a cleft palate who was bullied her life for looking and speaking differently than other people. So I was rooted in the thought that no one is more special than anyone else, and that everyone is deserving of love and respect. So yes, I grew up not seeing color and being colorblind as a sign of respect. And it's not that we didn't believe that racial bigotry existed, it just didn't exist in our home or our heart. So I learned because of this, but more importantly because of the King Center, that it's well-meaning, but it's incorrect thinking. That I have to see race, because for me not to see race, it's a privilege. And it's a privilege that people of color don't get to have. And if I want things to be equal, which I do, then I have to see everyone's race, including, especially mine, because mine is privileged. And that I do, in fact, have white privilege. I reap the benefits of that every day. And if I don't understand that, I can't see that the deck has been stacked in my favor. And it always has been, which is not my fault. But it's my responsibility not to see it, because if I don't see it, then I can't help change to make things equal. And just being supportive isn't enough, because I've been supportive of the black community my whole life, and fighting and hoping and supporting so that, you know, the black community isn't disenfranchised, but that speaks to my compassion and not my understanding. And I want to understand, so that's why I'm here.
And we talked about that too, how you're much better able to help when we understand everything that's in play. And again, it's all of our responsibility because we were born into this, and it's just what we do with it. How we respond to this system that we look at every day, and the different components of our culture and our community. And this global community has a lot of issues, and we have to pay attention to them and see what's the responsible way to deal with them. So, what brought you to the King Center?
Well, you did, because you were a friend of mine on Twitter. I didn't know you. You had been following me on Twitter. And so then when this happened, you said, you know me as this Twitter feed, but my real name is Vonnetta West, and I'm the Director of Education and Training at the King Center. You held out a hand. We talked and talked and talked for hours and hours and days, and then you invited me to the King Center, and then there's you. I mean, the grace of you, of the two of you, is extraordinary to me. And it's no accident that I ended up at this center. I was devastated. Woe is me, I'm resilient and I can handle it. It's not the biggest problem, but it hurt. My heart was broken because, it's hard to be called a racist when I'm a loving, I'm a mindful person, and I've tried to be. And that to me is what's interesting, and we talked about this last time I was there, that, I'm a reasonably intelligent person, and I'm mindful, I'm aware. I've been a surrogate for the last 4 Democratic presidents. My Twitter feed is filled with my support of transgender, gender, women, children. I wrote about how the Confederate flag shouldn't wave anywhere and how I get upset that our white Congress disrespects our president due to race. So clearly my bend is where it is, but how could I have been so wrong about this? Being someone who is, tries to be, like I said, mindful. That to me is what's interesting, and that's to me why I want to be used. I want my lesson to be used because I think there's a lot of me out there. We want to do well, but I have never had a conversation about white privilege in my life. How can that be? It wasn't in my education system. It's not even in my daughter's education system in 2015, and she goes to a good high school. I made a call to 15 schools in Chicago and California, high schools. Nobody talks about white privilege. I asked why, and they said, or positionality, just general positionality, because they don't want to cause people to be offended.
What people?
Everyone. They don't want people of color or different ethnicity to feel like, they're being put in a strange spot, or they didn't want to offend white people. And my feeling is it's not about offending anyone. It's a conversation, and it may be uncomfortable, but it has to be had. It's important because it's true.
Let's take a quick poll. If you could type yes or no if you understand what white privilege means. Let's just see what starts to flash up. Type yes or no. Do you understand what white privilege means? Yes or no? Lots of yeses?
Have they had discussions? Because once this happened, I have very accomplished friends, women like you in my life. We never had a conversation about this until this happened to me. Never. And now I'm having this conversation a lot with people, and it does get uncomfortable sometimes. It's shy. My friends that knew about this, or people that I know in my world that knew about this, were lawyers or social workers, where this was part of the agenda of what they were studying. Kate knew about it because she's in a diversity club, which is an extra thing that you do at school. And I think it's being talked about now for sure, more now. But especially people in my generation, it really wasn't part of our education.
Right. But if there's what's Daddy's quote? There's nothing in the world
that pains more people.
More dangerous than sincere ignorance.
And conscientious stupidity. Did you hear that Dr. King quote? Nothing in all the world more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity.
And so
Write that down.
I think in this case there is a lot of sincere ignorance in this regard.
Absolutely.
I
take full responsibility for that.
What happened to you, and I think we have a responsibility not to heap too much criticism on people who need to be enlightened. I think we start from a place of surprise, you know, and you should know better, and how dare you?
I got a lot of that.
If you're a person who's ignorant, that means you don't know. And so that closes the door. And I think part of the discomfort people are having is some of that, but I think it's also, unfortunately, and this is why I don't like the word tolerant or toleration or whatever, because that is what it is. I'm just putting up with you. I like the word respect. I like the word and awareness and understanding. Tolerant, and because we push that a lot, I think people are afraid to engage because they don't want to be accused of being intolerant.
Right.
You know what I'm trying to say?
Or be checked. I think
Checked.
that's another emotional word, is the checking.
But I hope you can hear this the right way.
I'm absolutely
glad it
hearing this
happened
the
to
right
you.
way. I am too.
Not because of you, because God will use you now. And God needs certain kinds of people to use in these situations. And
Grace for this.
I feel
Right,
this
yes,
is absolutely a moment of grace, and I have no regret at all.
But one thing in the discussion is, I was having a discussion with a friend of mine about this the other day, about the whole white privilege conversation. And they were basically saying that those of us who are in the I hate saying black race, but that's real, the black race, until we get to a place that we can see ourselves as a part of a human family who have, different cultural expressions. But those as part of the black race have to be careful that we don't transfer the blame and the anger to people who didn't create the scenario, because I think that's the argument on you all sides, so to speak, and those that have come along in the last, 30, 40 years. It's like, well, it's not my fault. I mean, I didn't enslave you. I've heard these arguments. I didn't enslave you. I wasn't responsible for Jim Crow laws. In fact, if you look at my life, I've been side by side in causes that support the black community, et cetera, et cetera. So we got to get out of this whole blame cycle, and because it makes people not want to engage and be able to connect and help to bring along others in the community who may even be more hostile, so to speak.
Your community, the two of you, for instance, with me, reached out, embraced, hugged, said, it's okay.
You're not an enemy.
You're not an enemy, and it's okay. And we're all doing the best that we can, and
You
sit down.
like this.
Right, and you did. And you have to sit down and say, you're too smart to not know this.
There's been a lot of
You didn't have to say that.
conversation going on.
Lots of conversation.
We embrace, but we talk, and we have.
And
Well, you can be smart and not know this.
Yeah.
I mean,
But,
think
Listen,
about it.
I was ashamed that I should know this. I should have known this. I should have known better.
What would make you have known if
Because
you grew
it
up
seems, well,
So, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where did you get
And
it
it's
from?
not based on, by the way, just in case you all are wondering who are watching, there are people of color who are not aware of white privilege and different issues that cause the systemic problems that we have in this nation and beyond. It's
And
not
there are people of
right.
color who feel like, wait a minute, why are we harking on white privilege and white supremacy when we got our own problems?
problem.
We need to get our house.
So yeah, there are all kinds of discussions. Yeah.
You keep trying to quote unquote blame the white person when you need to turn, things around in your own community. And my whole argument is, I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a both
Both
and.
It's the below
and the
community.
conversation, that's the thing, the conversation is good. I mean, there's no reason, this is what I'm saying, use me as an example. There's no reason to feel shame. There's no reason to feel like it's anybody's fault. It just is. And the only thing a person of privilege can do wrong is to deny that the privilege exists. That's my opinion.
but you have to help people understand it. See, if I'm born after segregation, and I'm born when there's a little bit more equity in our society, I'm born into a society where I see accomplished blacks or accomplished Latinos or whoever, I'm not going to automatically see what you're talking about.
No, and also because I grew up in
'Cause you
Skokie,
were
I grew
born
up in
into
New
that.
York, I grew up in Los Angeles. I've only lived in places where there seemed, in my world, zero tolerance policy for any prejudice or
Right.
any. But that's not the real world.
Right.
So,
And we have not done a good job to really define what I think, and this is a big, long discussion, we can't have it today, but the definition of racism, the institutionalization of prejudice, you know,
Yes.
where a race is oppressed, and there's not equity. So you as an individual may not have prejudice against black people, but you're benefiting from
That's the thing.
the structures and the systems
It's
that have been
systemic.
put in place before many of us were born and being perpetuated. And it's good. I mean, this is the thing I say about Black Lives Matter. The most important thing for me about Black Lives Matter is I try not to get caught up in the whole argument about, whether they're legitimate or not, right or not, all the stuff that goes on. The fact of the matter is they have brought an important conversation to the marketplace, to mainstream, and they have kept the pressure on. Now, we can talk all day about tactics and all of that, but more importantly, this is something that if we didn't ultimately deal with, well, we still could if we don't, but I don't think we ultimately will, because we are beginning. What we're doing, what so many other organizations are doing, is having discussions, and very difficult discussions, and realizing that we have to move from the talk part into what do we do about these systems and structures to bring about. I don't even like using the word equality. I like using the word equity, because sometimes when people think of equal, they say, okay, I got 5 books, you got 5 books. Well, I mean, we're not going to ever get it that way. So I just think that this is so important for now. My dad talked about it, that if we did not deal with it, even in his time, the kinds of things that we would begin to see happen. And so again, I'm glad that we have some of the tension that's happening now, that is forcing us to not go back to sleep.
That's why even it's my little small problem, but even in this sense, I thought, I'm not going to sweep this under the rug. My name was across the nation. I was trending everywhere. Everyone knew my name. I thought, I'm going to make this count and make this matter for, do some good. So that's why the conversation. But I wanted to ask you too about when you guys invited me here, and I had the most wonderful time. And Charles, your mom's dear friend, took us, Kate and I, through this 365 nonviolence training, and took us through this nonviolence 365, and took us through through your dad's home and your grandparents' home and your father's church, and played a sermon. It reminded me and revitalized me in this philosophy, and it also made me think, speaking for myself, that I've grown to take it for granted, because you have sort of breathe a sigh of relief and think, well, it's better now. Your father made it better, and the world is making it, our country's making it better, and you've seen progress, so you just sort of take it for granted a little bit. And I think I'm admitting that, but I also think there's a lot of other people that feel that way. So I think just bringing this center back, revitalizing this center, and bringing the message of your father and your mother, who I've learned so much more about by being around you and being at the center and being around you.
Yeah, to make sure we get her book. My mother's book,
There's a room.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's not her book, it's a biography written by her sister.
Right. I meant to get that last one.
That's a name to mention. Coretta Scott King, founder of the King Center. Vibrant, intelligent, brilliant woman.
Yeah.
You've got her smile. Your father's face and her smile
Brilliant.
is so clear. But this whole place, the feeling of this place, the message that you're so brilliantly trying to carry on your parents' legacy, it's in that way of thinking that with the tensions coming up right now that are real, and there's anger, and there's justifiable anger, and maybe there's no place to put it. This is a great place to come have these conversations, I think.
Yeah. Well, you have to have people who are willing to, how do you say this, so it's not misunderstood. People who can transcend the tension. Not that you don't recognize it, not that you don't. I have personal feelings. But when you have this level of conflict, you have to manage your own personal feelings for the greater good of everybody. Because I can get into the whole thing and become black power forever. I mean, I can. Just thinking through things. But I have to let this philosophy and methodology of nonviolence, as emulated by my parents, I have to let it arrest those emotions. Not that you don't have the emotions. Because I have anger when I see stuff happening constantly in my community. It upsets me.
I saw your face when you were watching the video.
Greatly. I mean, and there are days when I am angry. There are days when I'm PO'd. There are days when it's depressing. There are days when it's frustrating. You feel powerless and helpless, and then you get mad at certain people, or not necessarily people by name, but people in certain places of authority and influence that you feel can help make a difference. But I recognize if I let all of that overtake me, then I become ineffective and I can't hear, because you have to reconcile. This whole philosophy is about reconciling. If you got different folks, you got to reconcile, the parties, either end. And so, you got to hear what's coming from the white community, the issues, the struggles, the challenges, the fears, the inhibitions, the ignorance, the arrogance, whatever it is. We got to hear over here. Ignorance, anger, bitterness, all rightfully so. And how do we reconcile? Because at the end of the day, we can't kill ourselves. We can't shoot ourselves out. We can't keep dividing. We can't resegregate. That's ridiculous. What does that really look like? You go into this, you have your little community or your state or your section of the country. I have my section of the country. We've come too far in who we are to go backwards. You know what I'm saying?
We're supposed to be done in 30 minutes, but we could talk all night, I think. But
Did that go off?
This one went off. I'm trying to get it back on.
How did it go off?
The reason, and she didn't have the chat on, which is the reason.
Are people enjoying this? Are people getting?
Are we boring you?
No.
But let's frame it though, because here at the King Center,
You want me to get it back on?
we believe in Nonviolence 365, which is Dr. King's nonviolent philosophy and methodology. And in that, there's a concept called beloved community, and I hear some people say it's a ridiculous utopia, and it's something that can never happen. Beloved community is just somewhere where we respect the rights and the lives of humanity. So it's not ridiculous. It's actually attainable if we all work at it. But under that umbrella is where we're talking about white privilege. And it's hard to have this discussion in a place of bitterness. So that's maybe why we get uncomfortable and can't have it, because one of the things Nancy asked me the night we were talking after the Emmys is, you don't seem angry with me. You're not angry. I said, no. And I shared with her 15 years ago when I was starting out in the nonprofit sector, I purposely tried to make the white women that I work with cry. Because I had that type of bitterness with white women. And I came to this place of consciousness, but consciousness rooted in love, where I didn't want that to be who I was anymore. And a large part of why I came out of that is because I started to study your father's teachings. and see a different way to deal with conflict, and how to come to that, what he calls that higher plane of dignity and discipline. But there has to be an umbrella for these conversations. It's very hard to have a discussion like this in a place of wrath and rage. Kind of have to
Twitter
move out of that.
Was that place for me.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, I completely understood, and I actually thank them because it made me smarter and more aware, and it brought me here. So I ended up stepping in shit. I'm sorry, and I got a blessing, right? So, but Twitter, I was curious to know. Well, first, the piling on Twitter is probably not a good idea. What would your father think and your mother think of Twitter the way it's being used right now?
Well, first of all, language is very important, how you speak to people. I mean, dignity is a holistic approach. It's how you see people, it's how you speak to people, it's how you treat people. And I think that berating people on a Twitter feed it lacks courage. I mean, I think, he would say that lacks courage. But it can be used as a tool, I think, to create a beginning. I think it can be used as a tool to create the seeds of beginning to have these kind of conversations. Obviously, you can't have a real conversation around this kind of complicated and deep stuff
on social media.
That's the thing about technology, that kind of technology. Now, the Skypes of the world maybe, but I don't care how much technology we use. Ultimately, there's something about the power of our physical bodies being in a space together too. I don't know what that is. It's the human touch maybe, that energy being in that space. Because even though I'm talking here, it's kind of hard for my literal energy to be over in that space where you are in Periscope world. But being here with you is a whole nother experience. And it helps us, I think, to tap more into our humanity than Twitter, because you can be kind of, you can hide out. And so you feel more comfortable in an environment like that, letting what comes up come out. And not that you should censor yourself in person, but it forces you to see that person's humanity when you're with them. You can see their eyes, you can see the facial expression, you can see the body language better.
When they're hurt.
Right,
Yeah.
they're hurt.
Yeah.
And it may change your whole perspective. So I think it's good for something initial to, to maybe drop a few little seeds here and there. But if we're going to do the real work, we're going to have to create these safe spaces around the nation for these kind of things to take place. And at some point, we have to come up, because the way I look at it, honestly, I think we're all victims, and that's what Danny felt. That back in the South, we felt the white man was the victim. Even the Indians, they were victims too. All of us were born into this system. And think about it, when a baby is born, they're not born with hate. You know what I'm saying? They're not born as a murderer. None of that. So something develops them in all of that. And that's what this whole philosophy and methodology is about, is how do we return people to who we really are? Because we're acting out of the wrong self. We're acting out of the lower self instead of our best self, our higher self.
And I'm guilty. I've been guilty of it on Twitter. Last time we talked, I was here and we talked, and about
their names.
Right.
Wilding out on Twitter.
Well, and
you know what wilding out means?
No. Well, I'm assuming what it means.
Wilding out, Nancy.
Going all Nancy on Twitter. But you said, be more mindful of your tongue.
Yeah.
And
fingers. Yeah, what you typing?
it's still hard because Twitter is also a wonderful venue to alert
That's
people
what
of
I'm saying,
things
alert.
and to,
Alerts.
the Black Lives Matter movement is very effective because of Twitter, so that's important. If so are other movements. It's good. It's the piling on. In my instance, I'm glad I got piled on because, like you said, there's a moment of grace in it for me and for hopefully maybe other people. But in general, I'm trying not to, I don't like that notion anymore.
But we have to use it as a tool of positive.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
What's our quote here? We're going to use social media to make nonviolence more attractive. And we keep tweeting that. But when we say nonviolence, we're just not talking about hitting and shooting. We're talking about our language, our engagement on social media. So we want to use social media here at the King Center to make nonviolence look good and make it attractive.
You can tell the truth without being insulting.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And there were
Mr. Trump.
No.
I was just going to say it's hard not to pile on him.
Calls to
But yes, that's exactly right.
Or you can make your truth. Let me say it more like that. You can make your truth. You can state your truth without being insulting. Because sometimes what people feel is true is not necessarily true.
Well, hold on. We're going too far into our race factor forum on January 9th.
There'll be nothing to listen to.
There'll be nothing to talk about. This is just supposed to be a preview.
Oh,
so
yeah,
we're
there's
actually
plenty to talk about.
There's
that's
lots
true.
to talk about.
We're going to be there for 9 hours on January 9th. Don't miss it.
Can you say who at least is on my
Absolutely. We have in those discussions on January 9th, Reverend Willie Bolden, who was a foot soldier with Dr. King, a gentleman named B. Mitchell King, who is the East Regional Manager for Georgia Power. And,
No, don't say foot soldier.
Wasn't it foot soldier?
They consider themselves the ground crew.
Ground
You have
crew.
to hear that story because when an airplane gets ready to take off,
These are ground.
we give a lot of applause to the pilot. But we fail to recognize that there's an entire ground crew that prepared that plane so that it could be safe and secure and equipped. And so they were the ones, the ground crew, that prepared everything, the environment, and went in before Daddy and everything to prepare, train, plan, all of the leaders. So they call themselves, some of them call themselves foot soldiers, but he was actually part of the staff.
Reverend Bolden said no. He wants to be distinguished as the ground crew.
That's
There
right.
you go.
Is it on? Okay, I thought you were saying
Ground
something.
crew.
And then Aiden Hornaday is joining us. He's a 14-year-old young man who actually goes around teaching about giving and serving. Arnold Michaelis, who's a former member of a white supremacist group who now teaches and educates and lives nonviolence, will be joining us as well. Very powerful story, yes.
Change and transformation.
So what we're talking about, we've actually heard about it, we've witnessed it in our own lives, the shift that can happen when you start to embrace a different philosophy and make a decision to behave and treat people a certain way. So those are some of the panels. Some of the other panels. Dave Salil, who is a nonviolence educator, will be joining us as well. Tracy Berry McGee from St. Louis, who has recently won the NAACP Neighborhood Award for her work with mentoring and helping young girls in St. Louis.
And who is the one that Ernest? You see? You not recommended?
Uh-oh.
We'll let you know.
We'll
Yes,
let you know.
I'll let you know.
Yes, follow our
Follow
Twitter
our Twitter
account,
account.
follow us and
Yeah.
friend us on Facebook.
Follow the King Center, which I think I put on my Twitter, and to
Bernice King.
Be a King.
No, Bernice
Oh, it's
King
Bernice
for Twitter.
King. But
Be
I
a
said
King for Facebook.
Okay, that's where I'm getting confused. All right, Bernice.
Yeah, be a king everywhere. Raise the
I
standard.
do want people to be a king,
That's
be
it.
a leader, be a positive influencer.
Yeah, by the way, we get
Change
questions
things.
about that. Why is her Twitter handle Be a King? I thought it was pretty self-explanatory, but obviously not. But it means raise the standard, live the way you live.
Yeah. Kings are elevated when you see
Elevated.
them. They're usually elevated. All these people are down here. The subjects. It also means that you're not subject to certain things. I'm not subject to poverty. So you just, and kings also in the kingdom, in those kingdoms where they're good kings, they make sure that everybody in the kingdom is taken care of. So in that frame of reference, you have a responsibility to your community and making sure that we are doing the right thing for the good of everyone.
Right. Concern about the global community and the greater good for humanity. So, all right.
Well, I hope this was fun and enjoyable. And
Somebody to ask you a question?
are there questions on there that I can address?
Respectable questions.
Or not me.
Respectable questions.
I'm the learner, they're the teachers.
If you build it, they will come.
That's right.
No questions?
I don't know that they knew they could ask questions. I think they were just.
They weren't. Yeah, it's just a preview.
Yeah.
All right.
You want to come to dinner with us?
We're going to dinner. My treat. My treat.
She's not treating me to dinner.
Yes, I am. Thank
No,
you.
she's not.
Thank you, Vonnetta.
And I'm not. By the way, I am not cooking on Thanksgiving.
You're fine with us.
I will be eating though on Thanksgiving.
That's it.
And please tell everybody I can cook. I have some witnesses.
I believe you.
We're going to my grandmother's house. So we're talking Thanksgiving. That's what we're doing.
I feel very thankful that I've become your friend and your friend, and I couldn't be, though there's a question, I couldn't be more thankful. Thanksgiving's a great time for me right now.
Yes, they want to know, are you going to be with us on January 9th?
I am going to be with you on the panel.
Yes.
There's great people on the panel.
Nancy's
On
one of the
January 9th,
panelists on
yes.
January
I will
9th.
be back at the King Center January 9th.
We're trying to find a way to stream that as well, but we'll also be periscoping certain sections of it. So when Nancy's talking, you'll see a periscope excerpt of her talking on that day, as well as the other panelists. So be on the lookout for more information about that. If you can't be here in Atlanta, the periscope moments that you'll be able to see from the race factor and rights versus responsibilities. But just to touch on that for a moment, that's critical because in addition to talking about the race factor on that day, we're talking about rights versus responsibilities, which means, you know what, I have the right, I have the freedom of speech, but I also have a responsibility to humanity. So I could say what I want to say, but how would that impact humanity? Would it help lift humanity or would it lower humanity? So that's a discussion we want to have. Our rights in balance with our responsibilities to each other. It's a critical conversation and will also be a part of that forum on January 9th.
Good. And I'll be the neophyte girl learning about
What'd
learning
you
about
say?
white privilege aloud.
What's the poster
I'm going
child?
to learn aloud. I said I'm the poster child for white privilege.
I don't think
And I'm going to learn aloud.
There's some other people that will make it to that poster before you.
I'm happy to take everyone
Before you
on
made
my
it.
journey.
All right.
I have books.
Well,
and
I
articles.
have a saying. My saying is, I was just born. No, I'm sorry. Back up.
Back
I didn't
up.
say it right. Reverse.
Is that the rewind?
That's the rewind
Okay.
and the reversing part.
You all go out and try that.
So, this is my saying. I got it this time. Don't blame me. I was just born. And the next part of it is, however, let's get together and work it out.
That's a
So
great
tell
one.
people that. Don't blame me. I was just born. Because we were all born into this. Remember, we were little kids. We had a clue. Because we had a clue, most of us would have decided, I don't want to be born right then. Let me be born there. Or back then, or whatever the case. But now that we're in it, let's get together and work this out. Because we are a part of the beloved community of the human race. And we owe it to the generations that will follow us to do our absolute best to bring out the greatness in us as human beings. Or should I say spiritual beings having human experiences.
So
And that's a
be it.
whole other topic in the broadcast. Good night.
Amen. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Good night.
you.
Good night.
Scope out.
That was the perfect way to end it. That was